Welcome to the Expert in You podcast, the show for professional entrepreneurs, experts, authors, speakers, coaches, and consultants who are ready to elevate their business, expand their influence, and boost their bank accounts. Join us as we dive deep with industry-leading experts who share their top strategies, invaluable insights, practical tips, and personal experiences to help you achieve extraordinary growth and success. Whether you're looking to sharpen your skills, stay ahead of the curve, or find that competitive edge, this podcast is your ultimate resource for unlocking your full potential. So tune in, get inspired, grab your coffee, and let's unlock the expert in you. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Expert in You podcast. I'm your host, Ann Carden. And wow, do I have an amazing guest today. I've been trying to actually get him on the show for a long time. I think this has been a couple months out now. Alex Sanfilippo, welcome to my show.
And thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry we took so long to get this coordinated, but
you're a busy guy.
Sometimes I did want to mention I've been listening to your show, and I said this before we recorded, but I'm going to say it again for everyone to hear. This is like my favorite kind of show. The way that you bring like real actionable tips. Like I can listen to someone's story, but I can also figure out how to not do exactly what they've done, but how to take my steps to get there. So thank you for what you do as a listener. I'm really thrilled to be on this side of the microphone today.
Well, thank you. I'm really thrilled to have you on that side of the microphone. So in case you don't know who the brilliant Alex is, he is the founder of Podmatch. And it is a platform out there. I think I've been on Podmatch. When did you start that, Alex? I'm trying to think how long we've been on Podmatch.
It started June 15th, 2020 was the launch day.
Okay, well, I haven't been on it that long, but I think I've been on it a couple of years. It's been a game changer in the industry for anyone that wants to build their brand and their influence and just build that visibility and get seen and heard. You have made it so easy for people, Alex, to be able to be matched as guest to guest on podcast or to host their own show and find guests. So I really appreciate what you're doing, which is why I wanted you on here. So what made you start Podmatch? Why don't we give a little bit of your backstory?
Yeah. First off, thank you again. I mean, listen, that's like the kindest thing anyone can say. So my day here is made. Not that I would just log off now, but I could. I'd be real happy. I would never do that. But yeah, if we go back to before I had Podmatch, I was a podcaster before Podmatch was around or even the idea for it. And I struggled with the same thing. It was connecting with the right next guest and then all the administration that went between it. Like it was a lot of work, but that wasn't really enough to be any sort of product. But I did know that I wanted to do some form of work in podcasting. Like I really enjoyed being a host, but I knew that the industry itself, like I'm like, I think that's like where I want to be. And I came from the aerospace industry, which I liked, but it wasn't like super exciting because I wasn't an astronaut, skydiver, or fighter pilot. So I didn't do any of those type of jobs. I worked behind a computer. And when I found podcasting, I was like, I love this. I want to get into it. And so I'll never forget, it was actually the beginning of 2020, which happened right before the world temporarily shut down. And I was at a big podcasting conference in Orlando, Florida. I think there was about 2,000 people there. And when I got off stage from speaking, anyone who would talk to me, I asked them what they were struggling with in podcasting. And I heard a lot of things, but I continuously heard the same thing, like every other person, or sometimes more than that. Hey, I'm having trouble finding that next ideal guest. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of administration that goes through it. And funny enough, some people were talking to me. They're like, I don't have a podcast, but I have this book. What podcast should I go on? Can you help me with that? And it was really funny because I was writing down everyone's name, their podcast, their email address, like just trying to figure out, okay, what's going on here? When I heard that 100 times, I remembered what I just shared a moment ago, which that was my own struggle as well. I'm like, okay, this is actually not just me. This is a problem that we're all facing. And so when I went home from that event, literally a week later, the whole world shut down. So I'm at home and I end up whiteboarding the whole idea out. And I was like, wow, this could be it. Could we build something similar to how a dating app works, but instead of connecting people for dates, connecting people for podcast interviews, let the message in the platform and everything like that. And I've never used a dating app before, but I get the idea of them.
Right.
So I was like,
concept,
could we do something?
Yeah.
Can we do something like that? And that right there was ultimately what birthed Podmatch. And that was, I started work on it with my wife and another business partner. There was three of us. We started on March 10th, 2020. And by June 15th, 2020, we launched into an early beta.
Well, he definitely has the #1 podcast matching platform out there. I love too, Alex, how you really took what the problem that you were seeing, the pain that you were seeing in the market, and now you turned that into a business. You turned it into a viable product. And I think so many people try to create a product and then determine if there's a market for it, especially in the tech space. And they end up really failing because it's something they maybe want, but nobody else wants it, right? So I love that you took that market research and went back and actually did something with it. That's not an easy thing to do, to say, okay, how do I create this online platform? There's a lot that goes into that. I would love to know a little bit more of the back end, and then we're going to dive into actually some strategies around podcasting and things like that. But I want to just kind of share with the audience what does go into doing something like that, what's involved, and just give them kind of a reality check here for things.
Yeah, sure. And thank you. I don't know if I've ever been asked this before, so it's a gift to be able to talk about, and I think it's a really important point that a lot of people just skip over, right? Like there's a big gap here between having the idea and launching a software. So thank you for bringing that up. So first off, I mentioned partners, my wife and another business partner named Jesse. Jesse is a full stack developer. He is a true coder developer, and I knew from day one, not being a coding guy, the idea I had was software. And there really was nothing else around that. I did a little bit of looking around, like there's nothing that could kind of facilitate this. Like we have to build this. And so what I did right when I had the idea, I called this friend of mine, and it just happened to be the right time. He literally finished up a multi-year project 2 days before I called him. And I was like, hey man, would you like want to work on this with me? And then Alicia is a phenomenal operator. She's kind of like the engine that makes the whole thing run, and just really gifted with that. And so it kind of gave us each a focus. And so all three of us were like, yes, let's do it. We drafted up legal documentation. I had a lawyer that was able to do that for us, and we just kind of hit the ground running. But when we launched, we didn't launch what we have today. So today is years later with a lot more features. It's a lot more robust, a lot faster. What we launched with was what was called a minimum viable product, MVP, in the software space, which means
Right.
here's the problem. What is the simplest, fastest way we can get to offering a solution to this? So here's what we didn't do. We didn't go hire a designer to make beautiful branding and a logo. We
Right.
didn't invest in getting our messaging right. There was typos everywhere. We didn't invest in really beefy servers to make it run really fast. It took 10 seconds to load each page. And
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing, all we were trying to do was validate, is this something? Like, do we actually have something here? Like, yes, I started off by talking to people. They told me that's what they wanted. But in the world, people like to complain. So maybe it wasn't what they wanted, right? We wanted to make
Yeah.
sure.
Until they lay down their money, right?
Right.
Yeah, no, it doesn't mean anything, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we launched in, even though Jesse, my co-founder, is a full stack developer, which just means he can code in a bunch of different languages. He's a
Mhm.
genius. We went with what's called a no code solution. And we used a website called Bubble. I think it's bubble.io. And you can look it up, and it allows you to build something really fast. Yes, it can get
Mhm.
expensive and you wouldn't want to stay on it forever. But again, from just testing standpoint, this is how we went from, again, I shared the dates already, but March 10th to June 15th. If you think about it, that is not a lot of
That's
time
not very
to,
long.
right.
No.
But that's the only way we did it. And then from there, it's funny, the initial feedback, first person goes, hey man, you really need a logo. I'm like, not yet. Does it solve your problem? That's what I want to know, because the logo doesn't solve your problem of
Right.
finding you guests faster, right? Like, does it? And then over time, what you have to do, of course, is you focus on minimal viable product, but then you have to focus on continuous improvement. So we used Bubble. I brought on the right people. And because they were partners, I wasn't spending hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially to validate, is this something legitimate? We just all put a little bit in and decided to put our blood, sweat, and tears into it. And that was kind of that gap that, thank you again, Ann, for letting me fill that.
Yeah, so smart. I bootlegged it bootstrapped. I didn't bootleg anything. I
Yeah.
bootstrapped a lot of businesses through the years as I was building them. And you shared some things that I really want to point out here, because this is entrepreneurs and professional business owners and people that are kind of in our world listening to this. And I want to share a couple things that you said. One thing is, you did not worry about the brand and everything when you first got started. You just wanted to make sure the market was really there, because people will say things, but it's like I said, until they lay down their money, you don't believe it until it's true, right? Don't believe it until it's proven. So that's the first thing. But the other thing that you talked about is, you wanted to get it to market quick, see if there was a market for it, But then as you saw that there was a market for it, that's when you went all in and you started putting like the juice behind it. You also started improving it. One thing that I see over and over again, especially in the entrepreneur space, Alex, and you probably see this, is people are so flighty with what they do and they don't stick with anything long enough to really improve it and keep making it better and build this incredible, I call it, your $1 million brand, but build this incredible brand around it because they just don't stay with it long enough. You probably see that as well out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, more than ever. I mean, shiny object syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Just the word opportunity gets thrown around so much, and for me, every day there's more DMs on all the social platforms. Alex, I've got a great opportunity for you that I
Mm,
promise you're not going to want to miss, right? And that's all the
right.
context you get. And at this point, I have made the decision that my opportunity and the only one I'm going to focus on right now is Podmatch for the foreseeable future. So
Mm-hmm.
opportunity in my mind immediately becomes the same word as distraction. And I think
Right.
so many newer entrepreneurs, especially, or people that are even coaches, sometimes that they're kind of like, I don't know, like maybe there's other stuff too. But the reality is, as soon as you start spreading yourself thin, you can only do so much. I guess is probably the
Exactly.
best way to say it. There's only so much you can do. And typically when I find those single direction people,
Mm-hmm.
they man, they're the real experts. They're the ones that are getting it done at such a high level. And that's the type of person I'm usually like, man, that's I gravitate toward that person. And the way
Right.
the way I write this down, by the way, I put this on paper every day because I have to remind myself I do think new things are fun and cool. I just won't let myself do it. But I wrote down the word focus in all caps, and I think it was an acronym, which stands for follow one course until successful. My one
Yes.
course is Podmatch, and I have a goal to love and to serve the people that use Podmatch. So I know that I can't go to this speaking opportunity, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
opportunity air quotes there. I can't because it's not aligned with where my vision is right now.
Right. And that's so important because you have to learn how to say no to things, cut things away that are not. This is why having a vision and having goals and knowing where you're going, I call it your GPS, is so valuable and so important because it's easy to run in ditches. It's easy to get off course. You said it. They're kind of disguised as opportunities, but in reality, they just take you away from the thing that you were really called to do. So I didn't plan for the show to go this direction or to talk about this, but I think it's so valuable for people because I believe that's why a lot of entrepreneurs don't have the success that they could. It's not that they're not great. It's not that they don't even have a good product. They just don't stick with it long enough and go, I say they just don't go all in. They're not committed to it. And so they never really build it too much. And get the rewards or the impact with it.
Yeah, I want to share one story here because I think it'll really kind of send this point home. I have a friend and I gave him this quote, which is not my original quote. I'm actually not sure who originally said it, but it's that every yes has to be protected by 1,000 no's. Every
Mm,
yes has to be protected by 1,000 no's. What you're saying yes to, that means there's 1,000 other things you probably have to say no to keep that real commitment at the highest level. And this friend of mine, he was saying yes to things that were not his core offer. So he had some background in web design.
right.
He done some coding. He done all these things. But the thing is, what he was working on is he was helping people get really good audio and video for their podcast and YouTube channel. And he was doing
Mm,
like build outs in offices and like helping people get all set up. And he was bidding a job versus one other person. It was out of his city, so he was traveling there. And the historically speaking, he'd be the guy to say yes to a bunch of things. And the person ends up hiring him for the job. And he goes, "Hey, you want me to tell you why I hired you for the job?" My buddy goes, "Yeah, I'd love to know." He goes, "Because the other guy who came in here, he overheard me saying I need a website, and he said he could build me a website too." He's like, "So he wanted to build
oh,
my studio and my website." And he goes, "And that is an immediate red flag because you can't do both." And this guy
hmm,
was just so listeners know, the person who said you can't do both, he's a nine-figure entrepreneur. And so he probably knows what he's talking about, right? So,
right,
and my
right.
buddy, he told me, he's like, "Alex, if you wouldn't have told me that, I would have said the same thing." He's like, "But I told him the only thing I do is studio work." And he ended up getting the job. And I know it was a six-figure, huge job that he ended up getting
Yeah.
the opportunity to do. He did like a full, massive studio build out just because he said, "Nope, this is all I am doing." Even though you can do other things, he knew
Yes.
I got to follow my one course.
I love that. That's so important. I want, as I help people get really high end clients, that's the main drive in my business and my main offer. I help them build with really premium clients. I get the same thing where people want me to build a little bitty course. They want me to build some little program or help them do that. And I say that doesn't align, not that that can't be done or not that I can't help you do that. It's just until you have built a premium model, like that's a scale strategy to me. So you're not playing at the highest level. You're trying to kind of be in the mainstream and do what everybody else is doing. And that's just not the right fit. And so you have to know that, you have to understand that, and everybody is not going to be your client. And it's really important to be clear on who those people are. And it goes along with that same thing, that focus, but you don't look like the expert if you're taking everything that comes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then you're playing smaller than you need to. Hi, friend. I have an exciting announcement. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Expert in You podcast, but I have to ask you, have you checked out the latest issue of Expert in You magazine yet? It's jam-packed with rich content, powerful strategies, inspiring stories, and so much more to help you elevate your business and personal growth. Don't miss out. Go grab your digital copy now and join our community of experts making a difference every day. Go to expertinyoumagazine.com and check out your digital copy today. Transform your expertise into success with Expert in You magazine. It's not just a publication, it is a movement. So Alex, let's dive into some real podcast juice here and talk about some actual strategies for what's the best way for people to get traction on your platform? What's the best way for them to use their podcast? I mean, I know how I help people use their podcast in their business, but I would love to hear some of your takes on this.
Sure. And I'm really glad the conversation has gone this way, because everything we just shared to me translates just perfectly into how to do a podcast really well, or how to be a really good guest on a podcast. And to me, the very first thing is having this course, this singular direction, right? Having some sort of clear expectation for what the podcast is going to deliver to your listeners. And so for me, number one is that the podcast has to have an actual purpose. And right along with that purpose, it has to have an avatar, which means an ideal listener, typically fictitious. Like I call my avatar Adam. I can tell you everything you need to know about Adam. That's who ideally listens on my podcast. And that connects directly to the purpose of my show. And I find that the shows that do that are the ones that are doing really well, and the ones that actually stick with it. And to quickly share some data, less than 10% of podcasts make it to the first year of their show.
I
So
know.
isn't that wild?
So
Like
sad.
it
So
is
sad.
so sad, because people always seem so passionate and purposeful when they get started. They're really excited about it, and then they don't get results and they disappear. And it is really sad, but I find the ones that are actually sticking with it, they're the ones that had what I just talked about. They have a
Right.
clear direction for their show. An example, someone who started a show, I met him in person, and he said I think he literally called it like the show for everyone. And I was like, so what's it about? He goes, literally
Oh,
anything, everybody. It's going to be great. He was super excited about it. He goes, dude, it's going to be huge because anyone in the world can listen. And I told him, I didn't mean to. This apparently offended him really bad. And I wasn't trying to. I was like, hey, man, like, nothing's for everybody because nobody's everybody. I'm like, you got to actually pick something that you stand for. And I think a lot of us, we think if we go really broad, it shows that we're courageous because we want to change the world. But you're not standing for anything, right? You'd be better off
right.
saying, this is my focus, putting yourself on the line and finding an actual
Mm.
tribe. And to me, on both sides of the microphone, what matters first and foremost is having that singular direction with what you're doing. Listen, you can be a sports podcast about multiple sports, but you got to have an angle, right? You can be a
Right.
business podcast and talk about business, sales, marketing, but again, you got to have a specific angle. And I
Right.
don't just mean like this is for female entrepreneurs only, right? Like I don't mean that. I mean maybe this is for single parent entrepreneurs, then it
Right.
sways female, right? Like there's all these different things. So that's the first thing I like to share. And we find the shows on Podmatch, the ones that get the most people wanting to be on them are the ones that have this, because people
Mm.
that are guests typically are like, I know what that's about, and I don't have to listen to it. Typically, they will listen to it before they go on it, but they're like, I can read what this show is about and know that that is the audience that I can serve as well. They can see themselves serving the listeners of that show. To me, this whole idea is the very first thing we got to get right.
Yeah, and you're really talking about a solid strategy. And I see so many people that start a show or they think about having a show. I just want to put value out into the world, but there's no strategy. And if you don't know what you want the end game of your show to be, you don't know the purpose of that show, then you're going to be disappointed when the results don't show up. So, and there's so many ways to leverage your show. You can monetize it, you can get clients from it, you can, maybe you want the downloads and you want to grow a big audience so you can get sponsorships. Know what that direction is when you get started in your show, and it will save you a world of grief, but it will also help you get the results that you're looking for, because you're going to be disappointed if you don't do that right out of the gate.
Yeah. Someone I just met the other day, and this is like just a perfect example of a real niche podcast. His podcast is for truckers looking to switch insurance companies. Like,
Oh my goodness.
right? I was like, that might be. I'm like, what do you do? He goes, I'm an insurance advisor for truckers. I was like, you are probably making millions of dollars per year. I'm like, how many people listen to your podcast? He's like, not many, like a couple hundred a month. I was
Mhm.
like, yeah, you're crushing it, because if they're listening, they're looking for him, right?
Right.
Specifically. And so I told him, like, man, I don't know how much you're making. I'm like, none of my business. I'm like, but I guarantee you're doing better than almost any podcaster I've ever met, because you like actually found something. And so a
Mhm.
lot of us, like, that sounds super boring, right? This guy was passionate about that industry and doing that, which is really cool. The rest of us are like, oh, only a few hundred people listening. Like, that's just not what it's about. It's the value of who's listening, right? And how well you're able to
Exactly.
serve them. And
Yes.
that was, to me, a great example of that. And one thing I want to share here, and I think this goes for both sides of the microphone as well, talk to the people that really mirror the avatar. So again, the fictitious
Mhm.
listener that you say you serve. And the reason for that is, if you don't talk to them, you're kind of just guessing what you think they want. And perhaps you've been there, so maybe you know better than most. But the thing is, when you start actually having conversations with them, anyone who will engage anywhere, right? If they're engaging on social media, emailing, however they're engaging, if you can find them, or even you're meeting them at a coffee shop, just ask them, like, what are you struggling with? What are you looking for? This really clarifies your path. Once again, where do you go as a guest or as a host?
Yeah, it's so good and it's so important. And one of the other things that you really have to think about is the show name, the brand of the show, and is it going to be a solo show, or are you going to have guests? Mine's expert in you, so I have experts on my show, but I do solo shows as well. But you have to really define that and figure that out, because if you call your show something that isn't going to resonate with the people that you want to invite on your show or have guests on your show, you're going to get a lot of no's, and people will not want to be on the show. So it all has to align. This is all part of that strategy that we're talking about. Really define all of these pieces so that you can have a highly successful show. I'm going on my 4th year, I think, podcasting. And I just started a spinoff show, Alex, called Expert in You Showcase. But they're quicker conversations with entrepreneurs to share like their juiciest tips and secrets,
Yeah, I
what's
like
going
that.
on in
That's
the
great.
market. Yeah. But I had so many applications from Podmatch and what we were doing out there that I couldn't have everyone on the show, and everyone wasn't quite a fit for my full Expert in You podcast. But that's another way that you can think about your show, is you can do short spinoffs. You can do so much other content and everything from your show. You can repurpose it on social, build your influence everywhere. I have speaking engagements that come to me consistently, podcasts that come to me consistently, not just through Podmatch, because of everything that I've done with my podcast. And so it does open up a lot of more opportunities and bigger things for you out there. And which is the power of a podcast. But meeting great people like Alex and I would have probably never been connected or even had a conversation had we not been able to connect through this platform and through this opportunity. So yeah, Alex, what do you see? How do you see most people like to use their podcast? Are they trying to monetize it, or are they using it to build influence and authority in the marketplace?
I wish it was the latter of what you said, because I think that can be how it works. To everything you just talked about, like getting your show title right, I mean, even your
Mhm.
episode descriptions, getting all that really well aligned to what it is that you do, answers the number one question I get, which is, how do I grow my listeners? It's like,
Hmm.
man, if my show is called Alex 2.0, a conversation with Ann, nobody knows what that's about. Not one person
Right.
without listening, right? But if I would say how to how to become a true expert, And then I say how Ann gets you on bigger stages and meeting the right clients for you. Like now everyone knows what that is. Naturally, more people are going to tune into that. So that answers number one question. We kind of already really talked about that, but more people talk about monetizing their podcast,
Mm-hmm.
then that's the second most common question. And I wish it was more their reputation, their relationships, because that's where I think the real power happens. Whenever I talk to people about monetization, like how do I get a sponsor? How do I run ads? And I'm like, man, like it's really hard to make a lot of money doing that. Like you can, but it is an absolute grind to make it to that point. And so I typically tell people, I'm like, well, why do you want to do that? They're like, because I want to be able to offset my costs so I can grow my business. I'm like, hold on, can your podcast just feed your business instead of you
Mm-hmm.
saying it's this separate entity? Can you
Shouldn't be
align it better?
separate. No, I love
Exactly, it shouldn't
this.
be
Yeah.
separate. And
I love
and a lot
this.
of people that like when I say it, like, what? How? What do you mean? Right? Like my podcast has costs though. I'm like, but so does your business. So can this just become another
Mhm.
business expense?
Yeah,
And
it
so,
can be a marketing tool for and
right.
resource for you. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that the better way to look at it, so yes, you can run ads and all that, but it's very, I can't even get into like, I would need hours to try to break down how to even do that. But a much better thing is to leverage it for relationships because
Yes.
what you can bring someone into the guest spot. You can be a guest on a show where you can get these great introductions. You can make an introduction to how you actually serve people. And I always tell people, like, if you have a business, align this, like you said, Ann, as a marketing funnel to your
Yes.
brand or the educational link. So like my podcast is called Podcasting Made Simple. It is teaching podcast guests and hosts how to get better at being a guest or
Hmm.
host. We call it the educational wing of Podmatch. When people have questions, and if we haven't answered on a podcast episode, we answer it on a podcast episode. It doesn't even necessarily drive sales, but I'll tell you what, people who use Podmatch listen, and they're among some of those educated podcasters in the
Hmm.
industry. People are like, how? I'm like, because we devoted our show to being the education that people need to do really well. And then they are on our platform. So we do well because
Yeah.
they're doing well, type of thing.
One of the other things, Alex, I know that has really built up Podmatch is the affiliate program that you have. You have an incredible affiliate program. And that's when we talk about scaling and growing something bigger, partnerships and relationships and JV partnerships, affiliate partnerships become absolutely essential to your business, to the growth of your business. And a lot of people really miss out on that piece. And they, like you said it too, building relationships, they miss out on that. And there's so much that happens outside of our little bubble, right? And so when we connect on a bigger level and we start expanding our thinking and our network and the people that we're connected to, that's where really incredible things happen. So the fact that you have that affiliate partnership uh, game plan or plan on Podmatch is a game changer for people too. So now they can monetize in that way as well. And so I love that you've done that, but I'm sure that helped you grow exponentially and even a lot faster.
Yeah, it definitely did. So we have like two plans basically of if you're a guest and a host and you bring someone through your affiliate link, it's 20% lifetime reoccurring. So we make sure that, hey, every month, as long as that person you bring on is staying on, like you're earning back. Because the idea is like, hey, if you bring 5 people, we want your account paid for, basically.
Right.
And on the host side, we did what we call our pod value initiative, which is we actually do profit sharing with hosts that use the platform. So if a podcast host use Podmatch to find their guest, after the interview, they get paid. And it's
Mhm.
not enough. No one's going to get rich doing it, but the goal is can we offset host production cost? And I think the heart behind this is what really matters. One, we call ourselves a community. Like if you ever hear me talk about Podmatch, I never use the word customers. I never use the term users. I'm not looking at people as a number. We're looking at humans as humans, and that's who we want to serve. And I find the only way to be like a real community is like, let's all help each other. And
Yeah.
I think that there's something to be said for businesses and especially leaders in those businesses that can let that shine through everything they do. So for me, like I always talk about leading with value, serving first, loving people. Like these are things I always say. And I just like, hey, is there a way we can like model this through everything we do, including the way that we support people and put money back in podcasters' pockets? At time of recording, we're not quite there, but the goal in the near future here that will be happening pretty soon is to put $1 million back in the hands of podcast host hands. And we're
Mm.
really close to that while you and I are recording this. And for me, it's a great thing. Like I love being able
Yeah.
to see that and be able to talk about that because it reminds me like, man, it's not about how much I'm making, it's about how much we're giving and supporting the world and making it better through podcasting. And that is a group effort. And I think that the
Yeah.
leaders that understand how to really articulate that, not just the podcasters, but any
Mhm.
expert that understands how to articulate that well, stands out in today's world that seems to be greedier than ever.
No, I love this. I definitely, I think podcasting, I call it a high impact marketing strategy because it to me, it kills a lot of birds with one stone. It builds relationships. It can make you money in your business, but it also builds your visibility fast and furious. And and your influence in the market. So I absolutely love what you're doing, Alex. What are the big goals that you have for 2025? You're already crushing it. What's next for you?
Yeah, thanks for asking this. One of the things that I did wrong early on is I was talking about like having this singular focus. I have not always been that guy. I had Podmatch, I had other little podcasting things that we were trying to do. And in the last couple years now, we've been bringing everything under the Podmatch umbrella. We have one
Mm-hmm.
thing left that's not under Podmatch's umbrella that we do, and it's to help podcast hosts get more reviews of their podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And as cool as that's been and helpful as it's been, it's very like it kind of was built competitively. Like people compete on there. It's like a lottery type system. It's fun, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not, it doesn't stay true to what we want to do with Podmatch, which is again, community driven, community centric. And so we're actually bringing that tool into Podmatch, and very soon it will be. And instead, it's more of like a swap
Cool.
system where, Ann,
Mm-hmm.
you want to listen to and review my show. I'll do the same for yours. But also,
Mm-hmm.
we're allowing the guests to be involved. There's a lot of guests who are like, I would love another Amazon review on my book. And we're letting them trade. So, hey, I'll leave Ann a review on her podcast. She'll leave a review on my book. So we're doing it that way with some trading. And of course, we want to make sure there's integrity in it. So we're going to have ways for people to like upload part of a chapter, a
Mm-hmm.
sample episode for someone to listen to. They aren't just like leaving a review without any sort of integrity involved in it. And so that's the next thing we're doing. And again, that just seems very aligned with what we do, building a community around what we do. So that's going to be like kind of the next big thing that we're working on. And of course, like I said at the beginning, focusing on continuous improvement, right? Like we are still
Right.
focused on continuous improvement. It might be small things that we do every day, but every day people are seeing that things are getting better and better.
Yeah. And you really shared something that I just want to point out. And that is, I always say, have your core business or your core product and build out from that. Like, and what are the natural fits to that? So many people have all these different businesses, and it's so hard to do that. You talked about spreading yourself so thin. So if you can have a core product or a core offer, and then everything falls under that umbrella, but it perfectly aligns with what you're doing. So everything's kind of a natural feeder. It makes so much more sense for scaling and growing. So, Alex, what big challenges do you see coming down the pipeline for you to be able to accomplish your big goals?
Yeah, real quick, if you had a time machine, could you send what you just said back to Alex 3 years ago? Because he really needs what you just said. If you got a time machine, I'm in the wrong business. I want to come work for you, by the way. But the challenges I'm seeing coming up for us, not just in implementing that, but with listen, I like AI. I use AI for certain things, but we are seeing AI kind of jump into podcasting in a not so healthy way. People are claiming they have podcasts, but there's no human element to it. They're just feeding it into
I
these
saw
different.
you do a video around that
Yeah, yeah.
recently.
I,
Yes,
I I
I
did,
didn't
yeah.
even know that, but yeah, I was like, what?
Yeah, and I didn't
Crazy.
mean for it to sound harsh, but we have to be careful because we had somebody try to, well, no, they did join Podmatch. We kicked them off, but it was a an AI that somebody designed that was
Mhm.
fooling people. They were thinking they were talking to a person, being interviewed by a person, but they're being interviewed by a machine. And the
Wow.
machine itself was only interviewing guests to pull as much data as they can to sell it to bigger media companies that would be interested in
Mm.
selling those specific pain points that they were. It's extremely smart. I don't like that type of thing because I think it really blurs a moral line
Mhm.
of humanity versus consumerism at its almost an evil level, right? And so
Yes.
we've built in systems to really combat that. But in general, because it's an AI, it understands what we talked about at the beginning: how to name a show really well, how to name titles that will grab people, right? So I think we might see podcasting get a little bit more competitive, and it'll be humans versus machines at some point, which I don't
Mm.
love. But here's what I'll say to that. I've realized that when people listen to an all like robot podcast, they don't feel anything. When
Ah,
someone listens to you and me today, someone is going to feel something based off what they heard. And to my knowledge, I don't think there's any way a machine can ever replace that. That's something
yeah,
that's
we
just
are real.
inside of us.
We are real.
Right? Yeah, we are real. But there's something there that
Yeah.
humans resonate with humans, right? And that they
Mhm.
can feel something. I think even just by listening
Yes.
level, it'll never be able to truly fool people. But I do see that being something that I think that we'll have to continue to fight, and we'll have to push back on that a little bit.
It's kind of a crazy world out there right
It
now.
is.
Yeah, it's like the wild, wild west with with AI, I think.
Yep.
But Alex, I really value your time, and this has been such a great conversation. I thank you so much for being here. What would you like to leave my audience with? Final words.
Yeah, Ann, thank you again for having me. My final words to share today would be this: do for one what you wish you could do for all. I think that every single one of us would love to change the world. We love to impact people at a mass level. But at the end of the day, what matters most is not forgetting the one person who needs you most. And perhaps you know
Mm.
who that is. Maybe you don't know who that is. But regardless, if we have this mindset that, you know what, just going to serve this one person today really, really well. I'm going to love them. I'm going to help them. And in turn, hopefully they'll do the same. And perhaps that snowballs. But at the end of the day, I think the world would be a better place if every single one of us would focus on the one person who needs us most. And I think podcasting is a beautiful medium for that. And that's one of the reasons I really believe in it. So that's kind of my final thought for us today. And Ann, thank you again for what you do. It's truly an honor to be here today.
Oh, well, no, the honor is mine, Alex. This has been great. So thank you so much. And I love that final thought. It just shows your heart. Who would think that from an aerospace engineer? I mean, I'm just kidding. I love it. I love what you're doing. So keep on going, Alex. And I can't wait to see all the cool things that you will have coming down the pipeline with Podmatch. And again, if you have never been on that platform or checked that platform out and you have a podcast or you're thinking about starting a show, it is literally the best platform out there for connecting people. And he's just doing such a great job and continuing to improve it. So again, everyone, thank you so much, Alex, for being here. And thank you for listening. Please listen to the show, share it, care. I always say sharing is caring, right? And subscribe to the show. And until next time, have an amazing day and go rock your business. God bless you all. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in today. If you're as excited as I am about scaling up your influence, business, and bank account, then I have just the thing for you. But first, make sure you subscribe to the show. Second, make sure you share it with someone you care about because sharing is caring. And third, head on over to join me in my next free virtual exclusive workshop where we'll explore proven strategies to boost your business and maximize your potential. Look, it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you're looking to take your business to the next level, my workshops are designed for you. So head on over to expertinyouworkshop.com to reserve your spot and get ready to transform your expertise into extraordinary success. I'm looking forward to seeing you there and helping you achieve incredible growth. Until next time, make sure you're always seeking the expert in you, and God bless. Have an amazing day.